Good morning to an incredible group of leaders and practitioners for a number of years. You know, everybody at this table has achieved great success in leadership in your careers, but I think we can all agree that you didn't get there by yourself, right? And most of us have had at least one mentor, if not multiple mentors along our career, and we're going to talk about that a little bit this morning. And so, I guess we'll kind of open it up, talking about who your mentor was, how you chose your mentor, or if your mentor chose you, and kind of what made that relationship special for you. And, Adam, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. When I was at the Naval Academy as a midshipman, I guess the school had a great idea, so we kept our sanity. We had families in the area that would take us in. So, you get a home-cooked meal, kind of relax and be human a little bit. And my sponsor father, he chose me in the sense that, he was like a second father to me. And he was from the streets of Philadelphia, grew up with nothing, and didn't use the cleanest language around the home, I remember, but he had a heart of gold, very philanthropic. Not only was he a mentor in the sense that he led by example, but more importantly, when I hit the hardest point in my career, I was kind of a more senior officer in the Navy at that point. Well, because I'm sitting next to a general. In my career, I was lieutenant commander. I was a decade into it. I was struggling with work and family, and I called him, and he said, Adam, you need a journal, and you need to read. You need to spend some quiet time. Now, it doesn't sound profound, but to your point, just having the trust and having somebody know you like that, it literally changed my life because it gave me the opportunity to kind of go on the path that I needed to go. I was just a little rat racing around in a maze.
Great. Scott, what would you say?
One of the things that I've often looked back, and I have two of my mentors sitting at the table, which is kind of a unique thing for our team. But what I recognize is that, a lot of times somebody's like, who is your mentor? Like it's singular.
Right.
And what I found was I had a lot of them. I needed it. Yep. and so that was the great thing, was that I surrounded myself with all of these individuals who had more experience, had more wisdom, all those things to help me along the way, because I could always ask them for their thoughts on anything. And I recognized that early on, and I just kept doing it. I just kept finding, I think everybody I worked for became another mentor, not just in that role, but I held on to them. And I think that for me, that it doesn't stop, because, there's always somebody who's got that experience that you need, that's, smarter than you. And, and so just build an army of mentors. And that was my experience, was just keep finding more of them that I always had one that I could reach out to like that. And of course, they were always willing to help.
So now that you're, now that you're retired from the military, do you maintain that same mentor relationship with all those various folks, right?
And I still, and that's, I think it's a lifelong journey, and of course, and then it allows you to continue to pay it forward, because I now have Adam's experience, and I sponsored 3 cadets at the Air Force Academy as a retired officer, and so. But there's always going to be that challenge that you reach that you've not experienced before, and so I think that maintaining that is there's no end to it, because it's not just about work, and I think that's another misconception, is that mentors are all about helping you through your professional journey, but it's like Adam just shared. A lot of times it's your personal journeys that hey, I'm in a tough spot. And you've got your immediate network, but I think it's always helpful to have somebody else to reach out to.
Sure. Dave?
I couldn't agree with Scott more. I've kind of had whether I knew I was doing it or didn't know I was doing it at a young age, but certainly at an older age, I paid more attention to it. Kind of an army of mentors, and I know it really started when I was a kid, and he still is my number one guy. Is my dad. You know, we're close. I'll just leave it at that. But you know, it's one of those things. You grow and you evolve, and you know, both personally and professionally, and you figure out what you try to, you know, debrief yourself or be honest with yourself of kind of where you may be lacking or where you may need some guidance, and you reach out to the individuals that have impacted your life in those areas, and you know, hope to learn and grow more as a result of talking to them. And I'll say, you know, one thing also is being a mentor to a number of folks is you shouldn't stop learning while you're trying to help them and give them advice, because there's a lot to be learned from the ones that are looking for advice from you. You know, I don't ever look at that as a one-way street, I guess, is the best way of putting it. Oh, he's a protege, or he's somebody or she's somebody that, you know, is reaching out to me for career advice, or thinking and you listen to their stories and what they're doing. You should be learning, hopefully, a little bit about yourself as a result of just hearing what they need and what they're reaching out to you about that's going on in their life, be it, you know, personal or professional.
Yep, great. Amy?
Well, through the years, I've had so many great leaders take me under their wing and help me, giving me new opportunities and putting me in for awards and things like that, really grooming me for bigger things. So it wasn't until about age 30, it really clicked, is that, you know, the saying is, you're not a leader until you make other leaders. And so when I kind of realized this, and it was my turn to give back to the people coming behind me, the junior people in the military, and when I started to see the people that looked to me for advice, I could hear the voice of my gunnery sergeant and my master sergeant and my captain go through me and into them. And so it was this transformation. And so I love to be able to give that, all those years of collective advice to the next generation, and mentorship, whether it's informal or a formal program, is invaluable. And so those great lessons learned along the way. There was a story about a girl a female Marine that worked for me. We spent a year together in Iraq, and when we came back, she started developing breathing problems, and she was diagnosed with cancer at 22 years old. And so that was a real turning point, that she ended up surviving that and going on to do great things in the Marine Corps. She continues to serve today, and she's a senior enlisted member. And so watching her grow up through her journey is like almost just as precious as if I had my own children, is that she's become that close. So when you have life enriching experiences like that and they stay with you forever, when people reach back 20 years later down the road, you know that you've made an impact on someone's life, is that when you can stay in touch with people for the long game and having those life enriching experiences with people, you know you've made an impact.
Yep. So Bob, you know, I wondered if you might talk a little bit about how you've mentored. You know, you have a little bit of a unique background compared to the rest of the group here, where, right, you know, you were a senior enlisted leader. I wonder if you might talk about how you mentored, you know, some seniors as an enlisted SEAL.
Yeah, well, so I'll start it out with sort of my exposure, right? So I was 17 years old when I enlisted in the Navy, and I went into it for personal, selfish reasons. I wanted to prove something to myself, challenge myself in the SEAL teams. And when I graduated, it was very apparent to me that I felt unworthy, you know, of the community. So I seeked out mentorship. I looked at people that were emulating, you know, the characteristics that I wanted, and I would ask them to guide me along. And I'm the person today, not just because of my parents, my upbringing, but because of the mentors that chose me and that I since chose. And then as I moved up into the ranks and gained this sort of experience in all the aspects of what we do in the SEAL teams, and I'm partnered with, you know, junior officers all the way up to senior officers. It was a really interesting relationship. I had some officers that I was partnered with that were absolutely on board with taking advice from a junior enlisted or a senior enlisted person, and then I had people that sort of like pushed back with like, no, I've got my decisions. And I had to have a different approach with each of those, but it always came down to a mutual respect and understanding, and me having buy-in to where that leader wanted to go. You know, I never really called it mentorship. I called it advising, or like kind of giving them some of the wisdom that I could experience. And it really starts with that mutual respect, and then that person having confidence that I'm on board, right? If I'm on board with the long-term gain, and the power of this relationship that you're describing, the senior enlisted with the officer, as you all know at this table, is that I'm almost non-attributional. You know, I'm a trusted advisor that's non-biased. Yes, you're writing my fit reps, but the reality is like I'll continue on my path after we separate, and I can help enrich that person's life. I can help enrich that person's leadership ability and their impact in a way that's really kind of shared in confidence. And I've always gotten great joy out of being sort of in the back, you know, watching all these things transpire, but you and I are doing this together, you know, and that was very fulfilling to me to watch success happen on maybe one little vignette or one little sound bite that I gave to that person. And then modeling those behaviors well as a team, we called it a leadership team, right? Would matriculate down to the rest of the organization, and then you watch that happen. So especially when I was the command master chief and my commander, when we were walking, you know, our talk, and people saw that at all levels in the organization, you could see that mentorship happening, taking place, and that the senior enlisted and officers relationships all started blossoming because we were very cognizant about modeling that behavior and having open dialogues and discussions, and not all backroom chatter as well.
Great. Lamont, have you had it where folks have come to you and specifically asked you to be their mentor? Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I want to approach it from the fact of three things: being vulnerable, being honest, being humble. And I think when someone comes to you and asks you to be a mentor, that's actually a gift, because that person is saying that based on your experiences, I think that you have value to add to what I am trying to do. So to kind of go back a little bit, so my mentor, when the first thing when we started having this conversation, I thought about my old band director from high school. I actually got kicked off the band. You know, I got kicked off, and kind of going back to the, you know, kind of that vulnerable, honest, and humble, you know, and I was like, hey, you know, I think I need to go back because I was being a knucklehead. So after going back to him, like since, you know, from high school to going to the Naval Academy to just life experiences, going back to him because having that honest discussion, like, hey, sometimes with having that mentor, sometimes they're gonna knock you down in order to build you back up. So being able to take that honest approach is good. And then working at the academy when I was a military deputy athletic director, just having my door open and having one of those young kids come in and say, hey, sir, I need help with this. You know, and that's why I say, to me, it's a gift when someone comes in and asks you for their advice on, hey, how do I proceed in life? And one of the coolest things is, I used to teach a class at the academy. It was a naval aviation practicum. So for all the aviators that are getting ready to go to flight school, all of that, you know, having those guys. And I remember one of my students, I'm looking at this E2 that went off the carrier and it disappeared, and then it came back up, and it was one of my students, and he was like, hey, sir, I just thought about how crazy you were in class and this and this and that. You know, so being a mentor, sometimes you don't even get to realize until late, exactly, the impact that you have on someone's life, that, hey, you know, because I thought about, you know, hey, being in the aviation practicum class to flight school, from that whole 5 seconds of nearly touching the water to getting back airborne, you know, his life flashed in. You know, when I sent him an email, he was like, "Sir, I was just about to write you." You know, so that's where kind of the mutual respect comes into, where we have an obligation sometimes when we are mentoring someone to be honest and let them know, hey, these are the burnt fingers that I got. And also, I also think of Rudyard Kipling, and I think of the poem If, and being able to walk with kings, not losing your common touch. So when you encompass all of that, I think that's what makes a good mentor-mentee relationship.
Great. So, sir, you know, your experience is unique. As you get more senior, it gets really lonely as you get more senior, right? But I think you'll talk about here in a second, the mentors that you had, even as a 3 and 4 star general at that point. I'm quite sure that you still reach back for advice and reach back for, just to bounce ideas off of folks. Can you talk about those relationships?
Sure, I certainly can. And the good news is that so many of my mentors, if you will, would reach out to me as well. Sometimes they didn't wait for me to reach out to me. And I took great value and stock in that. When I would take over a new position, I would always call the folks who had had the job before I had, going back sometimes 15, 20, 30 years, and just ask them if they'd be willing to have a chat with me. And it was normally me just taking notes and listening. So they were of great value. I think what Lamont said, though, is really important, and Amy said it too. I believe we as leaders have a moral obligation to coach. And not because we're so smart and we know so much. It's because of our life experiences. And we've learned in a lot of ways the hard way. And now we have an obligation to pass that on to those, that are around us. And I always encourage, the subordinate leaders that I'm around, you need to be a coach. You're here for a reason. You didn't just turn the light switch on and poof, you're all of a sudden in charge of something. You earned it, you worked hard at it, you have some scar tissue, and I think you have an obligation to share that. So that'd be my advice to the folks, that might be listening, is take time to coach and pass on what you've learned.
Yeah, I think for me, I've had, like Scott said earlier, I've had multiple mentors, but one in particular literally changed my life. And I was prepared to separate from the Army very early in my career. And because of him, and there were a number of reasons for that, but because of him, I ended up staying in an additional 20 plus years in the military. And I think, mentors can really change a person's life, not just your professional life, but your personal life as well. And so I'm sure that that's been the case for just about everybody here at this table. So I want to thank everybody. Great conversation today. Incredible experience with Victory Strategies and the ability to, continue to mentor those who you've mentored all these years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right.